When you watch that national championship, one thing is going to ring clear and true, despite the fact that Tennessee lost to Houston in a one side of the fair. That was a game in which shots weren't falling for Tennessee. They got out hustled. I think they reached their max, but Tennessee has beaten Florida. Tennessee kept it fairly close in the second half with Houston, although I think they took their foot off the gas. Do you look at this matchup between Houston and Florida as proof that Tennessee is right there, that they can win a national championship sooner rather than later? Or do you look at it as, hey, they're 1-3 against those teams, and the Houston game wasn't that close?
I look at it as the former. And I look at it as the former because, look, part of those games weren't particularly close because of the personnel they got. Rick Barnes getting this crew to where he got them stood out more than anything like that. And I think he can get better personnel going forward. If you remember, guys, Rick Barnes, this was not the type of team he planned to coach. He planned to have JP Estrella and Cameron Carr during this time. And if he has those two, I think Tennessee could maybe steal one of those games and split of these four. And they're definitely not getting blown out the way they did in their 3 losses, the way that happened. So I think we're talking about a totally different type of team in that scenario. And particularly Houston, where the matchups would allow Rick Barnes to play bigger, because the problem with Houston was when Zakai Ziegler went to the paint to try to kick, the guys were just so big and closing in on him, he just wasn't able to play his game. That changes if you have JP Estrella.
It does. And ultimately, let's face it, Ziegler is he's still 5'9". I mean, if you talk about a guy who maxed out his ability, he's right up there at the top. And I credit him with the way he played. But at some point, 5'9", still 5'9", Caleb.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Zakai Ziegler is, I mean, I know we're not crazy about the term, but I mean, he is a classic overachiever, isn't he?
Yep.
If you're 5'9" and you're that much of an impact, he's an overachiever. He did more than he should have done, but 5'9" has limitations once you get to March. It's the same with like the Chris Lawson era. Everybody loved Chris Lawson and Juwan Smith as 2 great guards shooting the 3, but then you run into teams with athletic 6'9" forwards, on either side of the paint. Sorry, there's only so much they can do at that point, and that happened with Louisville.
Dylan says, if you told me Elite Eight in mid-January during that slide, I'd laugh in your face. I really thought Elite Eight pretty much the whole time. Daniel says, hey, guys, if Gators win the Natty, men and gals both will have beat the champ this year. Florida and UConn ladies, let's go. That's a good point. Who's closer to winning a championship, given what the Lady Vols have coming in, the number 1 class in the nation? Who's closer to winning a championship, the women or the men?
Oh, I'm pretty high on the women on that. And as I've talked about, Kim Caldwell's recruiting is incredible, and also just when you get the personnel Kim Caldwell gets, there's not as many teams that can knock you out as there always will be in basketball.
Okay,
in men's basketball.
Question: who's closer to a national championship, the men's or women's team? Bank on it. It's the men. Caleb, what are you thinking? Brought to you by Commercial Bank.
Commercial Bank is your neighborhood bank. What makes us different from other banks? We understand that every customer has unique opportunities, challenges, and financial concerns. We don't expect you to fit into the same box as the next person or business. Whether it's purchasing a home, saving for your child's future, or planning for your next vacation, we're with you every step of the way to navigate life's big decisions.
Guys, Daniel says Kim is closer. Yes, agreed, Caleb. No. Now, I will give you this. If this was women's basketball 20 years ago, when there were only 3 or 4 teams that could win a national championship, sometimes just 2, then yes, I would think she's going to be knocking on the door pretty quick. Just has to get one upset and she can win it. But no, it's the men. I mean, you look at Rick Barnes and the amount of success that he has. He was pretty close to advancing to the Final Four this season. No. I mean, it sounds good and it's nice to project, but Rick Barnes is a lot closer than Kim Caldwell next year, and as long as he's the head coach.
Look, I think Rick Barnes is a lot closer than many people think he is. And I think this national championship game is evidence of that. And I've been high on Rick Barnes from the start. But Dave, no, it's not about, this is no knock on Rick Barnes. You are underselling what Kim Caldwell has coming in. I mean,
well, tell me about it, because I've looked at it. I think it's fantastic. But again, prospects are suspects until they prove they can play.
Yeah, no, not like that. You're right. Yeah, when Nick Saban got those #1 recruiting classes, we were all like, "Oh, prospects are suspects. We don't know if they're going to work out or not." You knew the minute you saw those recruiting classes Alabama was getting under Nick Saban in 2007 that they were about to have a dynasty, Dave, didn't you?
I thought honestly, I thought that Saban was a pretty special coach after I saw that display in Atlanta in the 2001 SEC championship game.
Yes, but you also knew that Alabama was loading up on talent, and by the way, everybody knew it. That's why Les Miles started pulling scholarships from players who were considering Alabama. He was really scared that about what Alabama was going to do, and he was trying to play hardball, and it backfired. I think that they got the Paulden twins. They are loaded with wings and athletic guards. As I've told you guys this from the start, and I keep repeating it, but I'm going to keep saying the story because I got to drive the point home. Kim Caldwell runs a up-tempo system that depends on transition and three-point shooting, period. The question was whether or not doing that could work at the SEC level without the size, because she didn't have the size at Marshall. That's the question John Adams was implying when he asked her last year, could this style translate to the SEC? And Kim Caldwell said, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think it could. Kim Caldwell, because she was limited in the talent she could get in the transfer portal, went the route of going for wings who were very athletic, who were not great shooters this year. Her philosophy was, I got to sacrifice somewhere. I'll sacrifice the shooting because maybe they'll be better shooters with the system I run because they'll get more open looks. She turned out to be right about that, but they still weren't great shooters, and Tennessee still set the record for 3 points made in a season for an SEC team in the history of women's basketball. Now, on the recruiting trail, she's got these athletes who are sharpshooters coming in, okay? These are players that can run the floor and that are sharpshooters. So next year, you think she just set a record for 3-point shooting this year, and 3-point shooting efficiency is going to go up by 10 percentage points by next year, probably. This team's going to be insane. It is the Golden State of women's college basketball. I'm talking about the prime Steph Curry Golden State of women's college basketball. This team is about to be incredibly good. I honestly think they could win the national title next year.
Well, I have to project a lot of my guys with Gillespie and Carey. But I'm going to say that in Rick, I trust when it comes to the transfer portal, because I thought that he'd be totally antiquated and that he wouldn't be able to handle old dog, new tricks, all that stuff. But in retrospect, he has been able to handle it. And of the key prospects that he's brought in via the transfer portal, he's hit on, I would say, 3.5. He hit on Chaz. He hit on Dalton. I'm talking about over the last 2 years. I think he hit fairly well on Igor, Dubar. So look, I'll go a solid 3. And 3 out of 4, 3/4 of a point going to Igor, 1/4 of a point going to Dubar. How about that? So I have faith in him bringing people in to play at a high level. I'm projecting, but you're projecting too with the fact that you're basing your prediction off high school ladies.
I am, but I mean, you can't coach shooting a lot of times. So I firmly believe in what Kim Caldwell's building, and that's not a knock on Rick. I'm with you. Here's the other point: the parity is still not the same, Dave, in women's college basketball versus men's college basketball. So no matter how good Rick Barnes' team is, they're still way more susceptible to a quick bounce out or an upset loss in the NCAA tournament, right? So
yes, very much.
Yeah, I mean, once Kim Caldwell has the #1 seed, spoiler alert, Tennessee's not losing in the first weekend in women's basketball ever. Like, that doesn't happen in women's basketball, honestly.
No, it did once. Was with Holly? Kelly. Didn't it happen?
Holly lost the #1 seed, but it was a second weekend. Like, she's lost plenty of times in the first weekend, but once you're a top 2 seed, you're almost always making it.
Right. It's a little bit deeper, but not quite as deep. So Dylan says Barnes needs more than one offensive weapon. Last 2 years, it's been DK and Chaz. Well, he tried. I mean, Dubar was supposed to be the guy. We mentioned it was a personal issue we don't really want to get into, but
yeah, Dubar had a personal issue. And then with Estrella and Carr leaving, Igor couldn't play his game the way he wanted to in spacing. So it was definitely limited. And I would also add that I would consider Zakai Ziegler an offensive weapon this past year, because he was.
Oh, I definitely think he was. He was just so good on defense that you think of that first.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but he was very good offensively.
No, I agree with that. All right. So, as we mentioned earlier, Ramon Foster will join us a little bit later in the program, as it is time for This Day in Tennessee Sports History with Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker, Off the Hook Sports. have you clicked on that thumbs up button? Please do so.
This day in Tennessee sports history.
It's cool, baby. It's cool.
Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The Dave Hooker Show with Caleb Calhoun, Off the Hook Sports.
All right, Caleb. This day in Tennessee sports history is brought to you by Quality Tire Pros, serving Chattanooga's community since 1957. All major brands of tires, full service automotive, brakes, alignments, oil changes, and more. QualityTirePros.com, QualityTirePros.com. We mentioned Chattanooga. Oh, they won the NIT. Yay.
They did.
Yay. They had like a big celebration and stuff. It essentially means you're the 69th best team.
69th best team.
Yeah. All right. So what do you got?
I'm sorry. Messed up. On this day, it's funny, we were just talking about it. It's the 1-year anniversary of when Tennessee hired Kim Caldwell. Today. They hired her today a year ago. No one saw her coming. People thought that Danny White was going to go with Corey Close at USC, maybe look Jeff Walsh again, somebody like that, and went straight for the younger star at West Virginia. Look, I think, and I don't blame him for this. We've talked about this, Dave. When you're shooting, when you're an athletic director and you trust your hiring abilities, I think you do try to shoot a little bit on the cheaper end for a non-revenue sport. And I think one of the selling points for Kim Caldwell was where she came was she was cheaper than the other coaches he was looking at.
Yeah, like if you hire for the football program or the basketball program, you want them to be like 80% established, right? You want to know exactly what you're getting. But if you're hiring for one of the non-revenue sports and you can bring people up and have them improve under your watch so you get a better deal because you're losing money essentially in most of these non-revenue sports, and the Lady Vols are still that. They were breaking even after the football team cut them $1 million check back in the day. So I'm sure that this is not much better. It's just not, you're just not going to make money. So Caldwell was what, 50-60% established. I mean, it was a roll of the dice for
it was a roll of the dice,
but it was
a huge roll of the dice.
It was a solid roll. It was a solid roll.
It was.
You ever play craps?
I do not, but I know it.
All right. Well, I like to put down on the 6 and the 8 when we're rolling because that's the numbers that are most likely to get called. So I feel like that's a solid bet. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not going to crap out, but I think it's a solid bet.
No, yeah, I totally agree. By the way, I need to correct myself. Corey Close is at UCLA. Lindsey Gottlieb's at USC, who is being targeted. But yes, I agree. Kim Caldwell was a solid role. And by the way, we forget this. Because of how toxic the football program was, Danny White had to do a roll of the dice for the football program with the Josh Heupel hire, didn't he? To a certain degree.
But it was solid. It was the 6, 8, and craps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was a solid gamble. Let's put it that way. And really, if you go get a guy like, and I know he wasn't a part of this one, but with more coaching experience, like Shiano, for instance. I mean, there's a glass ceiling with a guy like that, too. If he was that great of a coach, he would have already gotten a better opportunity.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, I would rather gamble with the up-and-comer offensive guy than an old fuddy-duddy rehash like the NFL does, where it just seems like the same coaches get jobs each and every year, and they're mostly Caucasian.
Yes, no, I agree. And that's exactly what Greg Schiano kind of was. And again, only one person wanted Greg Schiano, and he's the same person who thought that Deshaun Watson should be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. So tells you all you need to know about his abilities to do things. Yeah. I don't know who I could be talking about. I'm a really nice guy, so I'm not going to call his name out. I've never called him out before.
Never. He would not do that. I want to remind you that Commercial Bank member FDIC, life made better, cbtn.com, cbtn.com.